else?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Long story.
Gary, we're going to turn to you to begin the program.
The opening act.
Come on in, Helen. Come on.
Let's see. So you want to speak in this way, right?
Oh, it doesn't matter. What it looks like right now is what people see. It's high definition. So.
All right. Jeanette, hi. Come on in.
Hi there.
Welcome.
We're going to go ahead and get started. Catch your phones, if you will. If you want to record it, fine, but we are recording this. And also the folks who are watching live tonight, we welcome you as well. And this is going to be conversational. And so we're not going to necessarily wait for all questions at the end, so to speak, as we're going along. If you have one, raise your hand. I'm kind of watching this side. Tim is kind of watching that side. Marilyn's going to be capturing, and we're grateful to Marilyn. She's got two roles. She's going to just capture questions, and if we can get to them, fine. If they're too deep for tonight's overview, we're going to hold those. And one of the offerings that Tim and I are both willing to make is to have a further session on a particular topic or subtopic. And so, but we just didn't want to lose it. The other thing is Marilyn has her timer going, and she'll be the one. We want to be done by 5:30, so that's our commitment.
Very
Hand it
good.
over to my colleague.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for coming. My name is Tim Lord. Most of you know me. I'm a member of the church. I'll get into my background here in just a few minutes, and along with Tim, we'll get into his background in a few minutes. But I wanted to start tonight by reading you a news event that happened in Wichita, Kansas. Marilyn and I moved from Wichita out to Washington State back in 2016. My brother still resides there. We have family in Kansas. And I almost shared this in church this morning, but it really wasn't applicable to our church. But it is tonight. So let me read you this short story. A Wichita man was paralyzed from the neck down after falling from a ladder while helping his neighbor with a yard project. Debbie Johnson said seeing her husband, Emmett Johnson, who was of perfect health, left fighting for his life, unable to move in the intensive care unit, has turned her world upside down. She said they are left questioning what's next. Going from a perfectly healthy 70-year-old man to this is so shocking, said Debbie. Debbie said Emmett was helping clear branches and fixing a neighbor's fence. He fell from his ladder when a branch landed on it. EMS stabilized him and rushed him to a local hospital. He underwent surgery to put pins in his neck. Doctors said he is now paralyzed from there down. I know he doesn't want to live like this, and he's told me many times already he just wants to go home, said Debbie. Nearly 2 weeks after the accident, he is still fighting through infections, Debbie said. Emmett is a fighter, but each day provides new challenges. When you can't move, you can't get up, you can't cough, your body is fighting itself, said Debbie. She said doctors have given multiple options, including hospice. Emmett's family now relying on faith to move through what may be a hard decision. We're just leaving Emmett in God's hands. The doctors have done all that they can, and it's up to God now we are just going to have to leave it there, said Debbie Johnson. Okay, that represents a catastrophic event that requires families like the Johnsons to have to make decisions really right then and there about what do we do next. In our audience tonight, we have at least one attorney. We have an active hospice chaplain from Yakima. So Eric, we're glad that you're with us. Tim and I are not going to talk to you about this. We're going to discuss things with you. I'll be 70 next year. That could be me on the ladder helping my neighbor. So these are not things that are happening right now like the Johnsons. These are things that we want to discuss methodically and openly with you all tonight about aging, frailty, and the obstacles that confront us as we get older. So my name is Tim Lord. The reason why I'm here is I've been a registered nurse all my life, just about, starting in Kansas City at the University of Kansas Medical Center in the 70s. The Johnsons are the type of people that the intensive care units in the university see. And in the 70s, if you had a major heart attack, you normally did not survive it. So that's where I started my nursing career. I later advanced to an advanced registered nurse practitioner, working primarily with Providence in cardiology. Much of my career was in cardiology and then chronic disease management. Both of those specialties involve, for the most part, older people and Alzheimer's. Providence brought me from Portland up here to manage Alzheimer's patients. And then in the midst of that, in 1980, because of my strong faith background, I decided to go to one of the most progressive schools of theology of the 13 schools of theology in the United States in Kansas City. And I earned my Master of Divinity, was ordained into the United Methodist Church, and Marilyn and I served for 8 years in the United Methodist Church. Any of you who know about ministers knows that the wife also serves with the minister. But after 8 years, I realized that my call in ministry was back into the health field and helping people to try to find as much wellness as we can in our aging process and to make good decisions in that process. So I'm going to stop here and then turn it over to Tim and let him introduce himself and his background, and then we'll continue into our discussion.
If you don't have a handout, there's handouts right there by Laura Lee. And feel free to just look, we're going to be talking off of the agenda. It's on one side, you'll see resources on the other. And then there's a support article that defines some of the terms that we're using tonight in terms of stages of life. But it's been really fun getting to know Tim, because now there was two Tims. Well, okay, I'll be Tim J. He said, well, no, I'm Tim J. Okay, I'll be TJL. He said, no, I'm TJL. So it's Timothy John and Timothy James, Ledbetter and Lord. And then it complicated because I had a Tim Ford in my church in Wenatchee. So bless his heart. So if you want to go Tim John, Tim Jim, that's fine, or whatever works. But I pastored in Wenatchee for about 9 years, and out of that, when I would do my hospital visitation, I really enjoyed that interface of faith and science, or faith and medicine. And so when I concluded my pastorate, I went and got specialized training called clinical pastoral education, which is usually through a hospital. And so I was up at at Deaconess in Spokane, and doing my clinicals out at Valley Hospital. And so I spent a year doing that, commuting from Wenatchee. And then I got a call from the Tri-Cities, where I was born, actually, in 1936. And so came down and started at Tri-Cities Chaplaincy. And that was my only second job I ever had, was then being a chaplain, a pastor chaplain. But the thing that continued was that interface, that intersection of faith and medicine, or faith and science, that they're both attending to this thing called a human being. And my role, the physician, social worker, therapist, and everybody, how do we work together to care for this person? And so I did some advanced studies on that, on up in the ICU, how do physicians and chaplains collaborate for the well-being of a patient. And so spent I was at chaplaincy for a little over 25, 26 years, and then retired 3 years ago from that. I was both a hospital chaplain at Cadillac as well as a hospice chaplain, all with chaplaincy, and something that was so I feel like I've been 3 ways I've been able to minister in those three settings. It was hard. One of the lies I found out that I was telling people is, you're not your job. People moving towards retirement. You're not your job. That was a lie. It was really hard for me to retire and to release being a chaplain and thinking as a chaplain, and what about this and what about this. So having said that, this is really cool to have this opportunity. So I want to say thank you for the privilege and the privilege of working with Tim on this. Today is going to be an overview. We really can't go too far into the weeds, but because of our excellent scribe and timer, Marilyn's going to capture them. You don't need to be able to see that necessarily, especially folks at home or watching this in recording. But this is so that we don't lose anything that might be important, either for follow-up or maybe to talk about a little bit later in the evening. We're going to be done by 5:30, so we're going to keep trucking along. But we're going to talk about 3 topics that any one of these could merit, I was teasing Tim, a semester of study. Frailty, understanding stages of life, and the particular one, frailty, that we're going to look at tonight. Palliative care, advanced directives. These are all very complex, very detailed issues, but they're all related. And so if you want to talk some more, again, throw your hand up at any point. I'll see these folks, Tim will see these folks, and if we can't answer it right now, we'll get it up on the paper and to be able to follow. So
I'm throwing my hand up.
I see that hand.
Well, it's something that you and I have talked about, and we feel so strongly about this. Tonight, please hear both of us stating that we're not talking about any one of you. Because when we start talking about this information, there can be some of you that will say, well, he's talking about me. He's talking about me and what's going on with me. No, we're not talking about you. We're talking about us. And that includes Tim and Tim. We're both in this just as much as you are. So I just wanted to put that out there so that you know we're all in this together.
So here's the counterbalance. This is not meant to be academic. This is personal. It is. And when I was first getting into the understanding and the development of the palliative care program at chaplaincy, my parents were becoming more and more frail. And so one of the main books that I referenced and learned from it's called My Mother, Your Mother. And it was a physician who wrote as his mother was dying, and he had developed 8 stages, and I condensed it down to 4, but we use that model at chaplaincy to try to understand different parts of life experience. But so I had my parents in my background. I'm 68, and so I know that frailty is a very real and increasingly real part of life.
So we're moving to frailty.
Transitioning that way.
Okay, all right.
But the other thing, if you ever go to Children's Hospital, this ain't about aging. So when you hear frailty, do not associate that with age. Because there's some pretty robust 80, 90, 95-year-old people. And there's some very frail all the way down the line. And so frailty is not an age-specific or age-related issue. It's more common, but we do. And so you will see the same way we describe frailty as true with a child. In fact, I have some friends over in Spokane who are going to go to the funeral of a little girl, 11 years old, lived with a tumor for 9 years in her neck. She became very, very frail. Sure. So we want to look, though, holistically, or I would call whole person. Tim and I have talked about the physical is related to the emotional, is related to the spiritual, is related to the relational. And if one part of those is impacted, it's going to likely manifest in the other three. So one of the assumptions you can make that as life changes in one aspect, it will likely change in the other three, more or less. But that's an assumption, an operative assumptions that we have. Then I'm going to say one word about frailty, and then Tim's going to pick up on palliative care and advanced directives. The handout, the other handout, frail is not a 4-letter word. Feel free to read along on that because it develops the 4 stages, if you will, the routine stages, the stress stage, and Tim was actually, his opening description of that case from Wichita was not about frailty. It was about catastrophic stress. Boom, something happens. And so then there's the frail stage and then the terminal stage. And so, again, we're not going to go deep. We can go deep into that at another time, but to let you know that we're talking about a time where the changes are happening, it's in a decline progression, and the goal is to manage. It's not necessarily to reverse anymore, but it's to manage as things are changing and losses are accumulating. For example, when my dad was nor my folks no longer able to drive, he was ticked. Oh, I've been driving since I was 14. Yeah, but you're not anymore. Smart move, we had the doctor do it. Say, give me the keys. My mom said, we're fine. I watch the right side, and he watches the left. Honest to me, that's a quote. So loss. And so one of the things that Tim and I want us to appreciate is loss is not what happens after someone dies. And this is where frail is so subtle, we don't see it as much. Frail is when these losses are progressive and the opportunity, because every loss, as you know, breaks your heart. Whatever it is, whether it's the Mariners or an arm or whatever, every loss breaks our heart to one degree or another. The healing is the grief work that we do. Grief is not the problem, grief is the healing mechanism. This frail stage of life is fraught with progressive losses. Could be something huge, like drive. It could be something smaller, like, well, I used to walk around the block 3 times, and now I can only go 2. Still a loss, still a change. So we want to be aware that this frail stage of life involves, it's a very dynamic time. It's not a passive time. So tell us about one way to care for people who are frail, Tim.
I'm going to back up just a little bit by sharing with you, my father died at 72. I'll be 70 next year. I've got another 10 years, maybe 15 years, right? I don't need to be thinking about this right now, do I? You know? Many of us are living life in this way that, doing okay, I don't need to be here. I don't need to be thinking about this. Tim alluded to aging symptoms being very subtle, so subtle that sometimes we don't see them. Weight loss, decreased appetite, agitation, decreased memory, not holding our bladder. And those are the main things, but the thing that I wanted to share with you that struck me about what Tim said is, so that's happening to perhaps my spouse, but it's impacting me. And I look, many of the patients at the senior clinic that I had, the ones with Alzheimer's were actually doing better than the spouses, because the spouses had to deal with these folks. So one of the things with aging and frailty that I want to plant in your brain tonight, be looking at your support systems. Be looking at your support systems and be really critical about who you have that you could lean on for emotional support. Tim and I were talking before our discussion this evening, and yes, the church is here, but the church can't solve everyone's issues. So be thinking about what support systems that you have. There are some of us that only see their provider just when there's a need for it. I would hope that you could tighten up that relationship so that when you go in to see your provider, he or she knows you, and you can have an intimate discussion about it. And then lastly, I'm just asking for all of us. It's happening to me. It's happening to me. I see the symptoms in myself mentally, a patient every 15 minutes for every day for 35 years, and then you retire. So retirement has really been difficult for me, and I'm having symptoms of aging. What's important is that we see that we are having symptoms, and for us not to poo-poo them, but to make note of them.
So palliative care is our second main topic, and that is a way to care for folks who are becoming increasingly frail. Again, regardless of age, So again, at Children's, you will have a palliative care team. Palliation, to palliate is to relieve symptoms, to relieve pain, distress. It could be, again, physical pain or distress. It could be relational, emotional, spiritual. We'll unpack that. And then the third are some very specific documents that will help ensure that as things change, that your autonomy is respected, your right to make decisions for yourself, your healthcare specific. We're not talking finances, we're not talking about your estate, that goes to me. But we are talking about your right to decide or to have someone decide anytime for you, anytime you can. So we're going to unpack some of that. Our overall goal is that as one becomes more fragile, whatever their age in life, just like the packages, when it says fragile, what's the next line say?
Handle with care.
Handle with care. That's our bottom line tonight. That we have a sense that as we become, or anyone in our congregation or our lives becomes more frail, that we handle them with increasing care on all these different fronts. So frailty, as I said, is not limited to old folks. The challenge when life is the routine. So we went to church today, we blah blah blah, did all our things, and tomorrow many of us will go to work, some of us will go do other things, volunteering, activities, and routines. But sometimes those routines are compromised, and we can't do the thing we wanted to do, whatever it was. And that creates stress, and it can be a crisis moment, and the goal there is to see if we can get back to the routines of life. Sandy's hoping to be able to get rid of that thing eventually and go back to the things that you enjoy doing. Many, many times when there's a crisis and it compromises our routines, we're able to get back to that and restore that. But sometimes those declines or the crisis continues to decline. And so you heard me use the word earlier, to manage, not so much to reverse, but to manage. And then during the time where it becomes irreversible and it looks like things are moving towards a closure, an end, a death, that the challenge or the opportunity is to find ways to be at peace and in love. And that's, for those who work in hospice, know that when people have a sense of being at peace and in love, there truly is a good death in that regard.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Please put up on the parking lot the whole topic of death with dignity, including Washington State's laws, qualifications, requirements, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
But that's something that is, that's the null set, something people rarely know about or talk about.
So that's important. We can't do it tonight, but we can certainly, and you will see one of the resources on here is from the End of Life Coalition. So, yep, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Go ahead.
So let me ask you all, what happens when you go see a provider? Whether it's a nurse practitioner, physician, what happens when you go see one of these providers? What do they give you? They usually write a prescription for a medicine. Oftentimes, that's the primary thing they can do. A chiropractor can do this, and naturopath can do this, and then a physician can write prescriptions. So one of the things that I experienced at the senior clinic with chronic disease management is people on many medications, because will a physician remove a medicine that another physician has written? No. And it's amazing, eventually, the patient's on as many prescriptions. So I think an excellent example of palliative care is managing what medicine do you need to be on and choose to be on. What medicine do you need to be on? What medicine do you choose to be on? And that's a mutual relationship decision. And so that's kind of where it can begin is, I don't want to take all this stuff. I don't want to do this. I don't want to drive to this town to do this treatment. I mean, we can give, specific examples. Certainly, I experienced, I think the one example that I will share with you in the senior clinic that's pretty common in aging population, and it's when people cannot make enough blood, cannot make enough red blood cells, so they need a unit of blood every so many months, every so many weeks, and so that becomes difficult for them as they get older. So a palliative care decision would be, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. Or maybe I want to cut back where I don't have to do it every week and I'll do it once a month. But it's intentional decision making where you're participating in the plan of care. Those are a couple examples. Jeanette?
Well, I just would say, I think I really appreciate what you're saying about thinking in advance, what would I do?
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
for me, like I've already made the decision, if I'm ever a cancer patient, I'm not doing radiation, I'm not doing chemotherapy. It's a decision I've already made for my life, because that's the right decision for me. It's not the right decision for someone else. I can't make that decision for any other person. But I think it's important, like what you're saying, to think ahead about what would I do if this were the case. And like you, I'm the same age as you are.
Yeah.
As you know, I'm 69 and been looking at aging care with a mother that's almost 93 and a father that's 97, who have not made, my father-in-law did not make his wishes known. So now we're having the agonizing decision of trying to decide what's best for that person. So I think it's really important to make your wishes known.
So you're stealing our thunder.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we are going to get to that
I'll
when we
change
start
places.
talking about advanced directives. So thank you, because that's spot on in that regard.
So Jim,
yes,
you've
please.
got 5 minutes left in the frailty section.
Okay, I can do that. I want to show 3 things to look for when you think, gosh, is my loved one, or even am I, becoming more frail? And one is increased isolation. Not as engaged socially, don't go out as much. Maybe you can still drive, still walk, but not as much. Things are starting to shrink, so to speak. And so you might notice increased isolation. Another is increased vulnerability. That could be physical vulnerability. There's one of the care facilities, Canyon Lakes, used to have, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have a Sunday evening worship service, ecumenical, interdenominational, and I would take my turn with a bunch of other preachers going and share with them. Their benediction was not some high and mighty pious, go and serve the Lord and all that. It was 2 words. Don't fall. That's the benediction, not very pious, but how practical. Because they knew that increased physical vulnerability often was a harbinger of things happening. Emotional vulnerability. That is all, and also spiritual vulnerability, and then relational vulnerability. We've been hearing more and more about, scams where they call and say, "Grandma." Well, there's a cool movie out called Thelma that deals with this. Got a few cuss words, but it's a gorgeous movie, Thelma, that talks about financial vulnerability. So increased vulnerability, and the other is increased fatigue. Just don't, go ahead. You go ahead. I don't feel up to it today, or I'll go once around the block, but not twice like I used to, etc. So these are 3 things that you can watch for in the 4 different, aspects of life to help understand, gosh, is this something, and you're looking for patterns, like we're talking about. It's not just the one thing, but patterns of increased. We talked one time to folks at doing Meals on Wheels. They said, that's our people. That's people with increased vulnerability, isolation, fatigue. That's who we're bringing meals to. And so, they got it. So it was a mutually enforcing thing. So compare, go ahead.
Well, so think about if any of us are single, because we're at an increased risk. So once again, I'm asking us to look at ourselves and look at our risk of becoming frail, staying on top of this as best we can. But for those of us who are single, we have the risk of becoming isolated and not getting out. So there's one person here that I have coffee with every Friday, and I need for her to keep having that appointment every Friday, getting out, socializing. So if we find that we're losing that in ourselves, then we're at increased risk of injury and aging even more quickly.
So hospice and palliative care. We want to move now to our second topic of palliative care.
Vicki,
Yes, please.
please note that being single is not necessarily only those who are legally single. You can really feel alone when you are the caregiver for your partner, especially
Absolutely.
if they have dementia. And you have to
Absolutely.
make the decisions for them, and then you start getting frail.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandy, for bringing that up. Thank you. Absolutely.
One of the most powerful books I've ever read is called The 36-Hour Day. And it's not about the person with dementia, it's about the caregiver. So thank you, that's spot on.
So I moved ahead of us with palliative care, so we can.
But talk about the difference between hospice care and palliative care.
So from my experience, palliative care is when we are looking at our plan of health care and making intentional decisions that are comfort-oriented, as opposed to trying to live as long as I can live. So the example I just gave you about the woman needing the blood transfusions every week. And so a palliative care decision would be, well, I can do this twice a month. I can do that better than every week, or maybe to the point things are such that I can now do them once a month. It is comfort oriented, and it is intentional in working with our healthcare system so that we're opting to make some reductions, make life easier, less stressful, less medicines perhaps, less transfusions, comfort oriented as opposed to life-saving. Now, if this woman who now is down to a blood transfusion every month, she starts declining to the point that the once a month blood transfusion is not life-sustaining, then we look at hospice. Jimmy Carter is an excellent example of this. He was on palliative care to the point that he got tired of his transfusions. And he said, I'm done with this, and I'm willing now to come to peace with my God and go on to hospice. He's still alive because he's living comfortably, but his treatment is not life longevity, it's comfort. Hospice then goes into providing comfort when, by definition, death within 6 months. That's the way the Medicare definition works. However, when I was managing hospice on the west side, we had people in for a year and a half because they still qualified for the possibility of dying within 6 months. But it is oriented around really comforting that individual while death would be imminent. Tim?
Now, palliative care starts as soon as you take an aspirin. Its intent is to relieve symptoms. If you go in for surgery and you get anesthesia, that's palliative care. So palliative care is not, so I think you see the line under the palliative care. All hospice care is about palliative care only. No life-sustaining treatments. But palliative care, but not all palliative care is about hospice care. And so I want to make that distinction that anytime we try to palliate stress, pain, discomfort, whatever, you might still be on a therapeutic course, a curative course. That's A-okay. Children, for Medicare purposes, can always receive both be on hospice and still receive curative efforts. Also, people on the VA can receive both curative and palliative care. But hospice is palliative care only, and so receiving Medicare benefits, you do have to make a choice, either to continue with a curative approach, therapeutic approach, or to go a comfort care only approach.
Example would be renal dialysis.
Yes.
Renal dialysis. So perhaps my kidneys have failed to the point that I need renal dialysis. I would say, hey, that's a palliative for me. For me to go on to hospice, I would have to stop renal dialysis.
It's trying to prolong.
That's correct.
But if you've got, let's say you got a huge tumor pressing in on your breathing tube, and radiation shrank that so you could breathe, that's a comfort measure.
Right.
A UTI, to treat a UTI is a comfort measure because otherwise it increases confusion and disorientation. But when it's treated, it doesn't make you live longer, but you're more comfortable.
So if I stop the medicine for my thinning hair, is that palliative? Or
well, I did. Look what happened.
Or is that going to be hospice? It may be both, right? I may need to go to hospice.
Because it's killing you, right? No. So I'm going to look to honor our sense of the 4 aspects. We talk about the physical changes and the declines. And one of the things that Tim has been very passionate about out of his journey was that our physicians were still having to push as a society to get time. And you struggled with the insufficient time to sit with your doc and say, I need to talk about what matters most to me in terms of my healthcare, especially as things progress, as you were saying. Advanced directives, the POLST form, we'll get into that. You'll also see references on the back to how to get a POLST form. Spiritual changes, my sense of who I am and who I am changing. Who do I belong to and how is that changing? how do I behave? How do I conduct my life? And how that is changing. Emotionally, where the losses are. And we talked about losses already. And then the relational impact, we kind of talked about some of that in terms of staying in touch. So in the italicized, some suggestions. Talk to your doc. Insist on that time. Your intrinsic faith helps. Now, just showing up at church doesn't necessarily help. But what you believe down in your soul, where no one can see it, what sustains you, like the joy of the Lord is my strength, that is important. So your intrinsic faith helps. Use it. Go out, if you need to go out and cuss out God and say, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Do it. To come, we've heard testimony of people saying that hymn just hooked me.
Oh my goodness.
It just spoke to me, it lifted me. Today's the anthem solo was just so powerful. And thank goodness the words were in English, because we could see how powerful that is. Tim.
I want to confess this. Marilyn and I weren't attending church for a while here, and it is because of this discussion that we felt the need to be in a church family, and Reverend Erickson received us. So being a part of a church family is critical, and you eventually get to know people that you feel good about, you feel comfortable. I can talk to this person, the minister being one of those. But there are so many incredible people in our church family. I want to emphasize the invitation to each of us to talk further about our spirituality if we need to do that. It's important to be able to just dialogue with someone whom we trust. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about that. I've not been a good person always. Anyway, the point being is the church family here can walk us through that journey.
I think one of the most brilliant things the people who were part of redesigning the church was the narthex and the fellowship hall. Those of you who remember the old narthex, it couldn't have been wider than Mita Laura. I mean, it was just cheek to butt every day after church. And I love sitting back and watching the conversations after church during fellowship hour, or they even spill into here sometimes. Someone will say, hey, step into my office, I want to ask you about something. So they'll come over here and talk, and that, amen to what you're saying. Staying in community is essential. So we're going to pause right now. We've talked about 2 of our 3 topics. We've talked about frailty as a stage in life. We've talked about palliative care as one way to care for folks in that stage. What kind of questions do you guys, or what thoughts or feelings are stirring up? Eric, please.
The mental dimension.
Please.
The decline someone's experiencing mentally.
Yes.
I don't know where it's in your descriptions here, and particularly someone who's got early onset of Alzheimer's, and they maybe inherited it.
Sure.
And so they are aware that this is going to be terminal. How does that fit into palliative?
It hits 3 of the 4. It hits physically because of the changes in brain structure.
All right.
It hits emotionally. Oh crap, especially if it's earlier on and you realize you're not just forgetting your keys, or your loved one has the 4th time they said the same thing, etc. And it's relational. So, or you can even go all the way. It's spiritual too. Why is this happening?
So there's no mental health.
It's all in there.
So,
It's
well, let's back
you
up
can
a
parse
minute.
that out for sure, but it's inclusive.
I'm a little unclear about your question. Let me share with you that much of my work here in the Tri-Cities was working with Alzheimer's patients, and it involved palliative care and taking them off the medication they did not need to be on anymore, and looking at the medication that would decrease their agitation and help them to navigate physically and emotionally as much as possible, And in addition to dealing with the spouse and supporting the spouse. So we do suffer here in the Tri-Cities from many mental health providers. That is true.
Mean a dearth, a lack of?
Yeah,
Lack of
lack
providers.
of.
Not enough.
Yeah, not enough. We don't suffer because of it. We lack having
Easy,
enough.
Lynn, it's okay, it's okay.
Right.
Not enough.
Yeah, not enough.
I guess my question was just, I wanted to hear how it fit into your.
It hits all parts of
It
the
does,
person
it does. It hits.
and the family.
It hits palliative as long as you can try to hold on to this person's functionality. And even interestingly, even in hospice, we will be giving this person medication therapy to keep them so they are comfortable. And you know this, Eric. I mean, we're giving them medication, Alzheimer's, to keep them comfortable. So it may be little difference between the palliative and hospice as opposed to, okay, we're gonna back off even further. And
It's complicated when it's someone who is depressed and they want to go to death with dignity as soon as possible.
Yeah.
But their life may go on for 6 or 7 more years.
Absolutely.
So that is not, there's no easy response.
Absolutely.
It usually requires engaging in that deeper conversation.
Yeah.
A lot of listening, and not assuming the first thing out of their mouth, so to speak, is the final decision, obviously.
Right.
And so that relationship is not just a familial relationship. That's where social workers and chaplains especially are trained to do that deeper listening and sitting with some of the pain. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here, but I want others to hear this, is sitting with spiritual pain, if I can just divert for a second, cannot be fixed. You can't say, oh, come on, just trust in Jesus and you'll be okay. Okay. Or a lot of magical thinking. If I say enough Hail Marys, to pick on the Catholics, or if I do, raise my hands and claim the Holy Spirit, to pick on the Pentecostals or whoever, we do a lot of magical thinking. We can't fix spiritual pain. So I'm looking at you, but I'm talking to everybody, okay? So, what spiritual pain needs is to be held and respected. To hear, and it's always in a story. And so what a person who is hurting spiritually, in terms of what matters most, that's what we say, what is spiritual? It's not necessarily what is religious, it might be, but it always is what matters most to the person. And that's being impacted, generally slowly. What they want is for someone to listen. They can't, and not say, I understand. Please strike that from your lips. Do not say, I understand. What you can say is, I hear you. Or, tell me more. But because you don't, even if you have the exact same symptomatology, you don't understand because it's a different context. So Eric and I could both have lung cancer, but his journey and my journey will be different. And so it means something different like that. And so spiritual pain and spiritual distress is treated, if you will, by being heard and respected, but not by saying I understand or trying to make it better. But people will feel better, and you've sat with people who are really good listeners, and afterward they say, thank you. Bruce, thank you for just listening. That's all I wanted. And it's therapeutic. But not because Bruce had some snappy thing to say, but because he listened. And that's, you know about the kitchen is hot? It's really hot when you're listening to someone's spiritual pain. Tim?
I'd like to bring us back to a very real practicality that happens in the aging process to some of our individuals, and Eric lifted up one with Alzheimer's. My son has a friend whose mother is severely demented. She does not know what's going on. She is totally demented, but because they have a family member who's feeding her and giving her fluids and feeding her and giving her fluids, she is doing wonderfully. Palliative care would invite that family to look at the, meanwhile, they're waiting for her to die, by the way, you know. Meanwhile, palliative care would invite the family and the healthcare community to look at options. Look at options. So is she at the place where we ought to be feeding her and giving her all these foods? So palliative care could make a big difference, and then perhaps hospice. Another example that hits close to home is my wife's father with Alzheimer's. So he's in an Alzheimer's unit, and he's eating and he's drinking, and he aspirates severely.
Chokes.
And Marilyn's mother calls Marilyn. So what do we do? What do we do? So palliative care, right then and there. And Tim, I hope if we don't have time to talk about it, we will look at another time of advanced directives where if I have Alzheimer's and I aspirate, I don't want to go to the hospital and receive antibiotic therapy. And we did exactly that, and her father died gracefully. So that's where palliative care can come in, and under these circumstances, no antibiotic for UTI. We're just going to keep doing this, keep doing this, keep doing this, and mom doesn't even know who we are. So that's palliative care and hospice.
Asking those bigger holistic questions. Other stories, examples, Jill, please.
No, I have a question.
Yes.
Or can you talk about support that hospice or palliative care provides for families? So undecided about what the path should look like. Because often the families have very different views on what the next step should be.
We just threw a monkey wrench into it, but go ahead. The families have different,
Right,
so in
that's
most
the question, like,
hospitals,
what services are included in hospice, it's not just patients, right?
in most hospitals of any size, say more than 75 beds or so, there will be a palliative care team. A physician who's trained in palliative care, boarded in palliative care, and often in internal medicine as well. A nurse practitioner or two, a social worker, and hopefully a chaplain to do the very things you're talking about, to hear those questions, hear that story, and develop that conversation over time, at least during the course of the admission. Now, some agencies in town in the past have had palliative care teams who would come to the home. I think HeartLinks still does, okay? I don't know if chaplaincy still does or not, has a palliative care team, but they do the very same thing I just said, but in the home, to sit in your living room and listen and listen and listen to the family's journey, story, concerns, from a medical perspective, from a social perspective, from a mental perspective, spiritual perspective. And by listening together earlier in the process, but where the fears are starting to build, what about? So you may not be at a terminal stage, but you can almost fear it might be coming. And how do we continue to keep that person comfortable, cared for, even if you are still continuing treatment, let's say cardiac treatment or stroke or whatever like that. But that's a powerful question, and that is an area that is really new. It's not 10, 12 years old in Tri-Cities. I used to go to churches and interview them to say, what do you do for folks who are, and I would describe the frail stage of life. They'd always say, well, that was the first thing. We have a monthly luncheon for our seniors. So, okay, what about the people who can't come, and on and on. And I would describe the situation. And again, churches are not wired that well to do that, but the need, this is, we know what to do in the routines of life. We know what to do when there's a crisis. We know what to do when they're dying. That third one, it's not sexy. It doesn't make money. People who are becoming more frail are not going to be big income providers to the congregation. It's a drain on the family.
It's a drain on the healthcare system.
Yeah, and so, but these are folks who are living life. They aren't dead yet. It's declining. It might be reversible or manageable. But this is, I think, societally, our biggest challenge.
So would hospice attend to the concerns of the family as much as in a relational, spiritual, as much as the patient, or is it really patient focused? Because
Goes beyond the point of death.
Now, well, hospice is focused, well, palliative care part of hospice
You're right.
is focused on three things. One is a safe and self-determined life closure. It's for the patient to die the way I want to die as much as possible.
Right.
Okay, that's a huge thing. The second thing is the family. Because the family is the ones who will be living in the moment, but then surviving beyond. And so, and actually hospice is done at death. They all go home. Then the family now starts up in a stressed, so the family now re-enters their new life stressed by the loss of their loved one. So their routines have been disrupted because first they're exhausted by caring, then their loved one died, and now they're trying to re-enter life. So they're stressed, hoping to go back to the routines. So this is one of the battles I fought with hospice over the years was, hospice is not about death. It's about dying.
Right.
The ending. And when it goes, doop, hospice is done.
Yep.
Now, the bereavement care team now comes in. Church continues all through this time, but we have to not think of the family as post-hospice, but as entering into a stressed post-mortem, if you will, post-death time of life, and care for them like that.
Tim,
Yes, please.
please back up a minute and operationalize how we approach the situation with our loved one. Hospice comes to the home, they don't come to the home. How do we do this? We have an individual that we don't know if they're hospice material, if they're palliative care. What do we do?
Okay, Marilyn?
You are 2 minutes behind your time.
Okay,
I put on your board what services does hospice
Perfect, thank you.
provide.
so I can answer his question quickly.
Yes, you can.
That is, you call. In Benton County, you can call Chaplaincy Hospice or Heartlinks Hospice. In Franklin County, you can only call Chaplaincy Hospice. In Yakima County, you call Heartlinks or, is there another one?
Multi-care
Multi-care out of,
and Aspia.
okay, so there's 3 still? Okay, you call them and say, here's what's going on. You know, I am, or my loved one is, and you describe the symptoms. And they will come out and do an initial assessment, and it might be for that they realize, I don't think this person's terminal, but I think they are becoming more, here's the language, frail. We might be able to help care for them, or might even not need palliative care, which includes a nurse practitioner, the social worker, chaplain, etc. But maybe what they need is home health care. So the thing you can do is call. A doctor for palliative care doesn't even need a doctor referral. If it gets to the hospice point, a doctor does need to make the referral. But nonetheless, you can just call one of these agencies and start talking to them. And they are trained to listen to the symptoms that you're presenting and help you think that through. No cost at that point until and then even then, Medicare picks up the cost of all hospice care in lieu of doing curative efforts at the hospital or elsewhere.
So if they were to need a home health care, palliative care could order that?
Yeah, they might say, you'll become, so I'm going to pick on Heartlinks. They have a care team. And so if you come under their care, or your care is supplemented by their care, is really a better way to say it, then they will create the care plan under the physician, the overall physician, the hospice physician, palliative care physician, will direct their care. And so what medications to keep, which medications to release, what protocols, etc., like that. And then the team, as this is being developed, is going to help the family and the patient as much as possible What does this mean? What does this mean?
Sounds like this would be a better decision perhaps than a 15-minute visit with the physician.
No, you only need 10 to accomplish that. I'm teasing. It's a much deeper conversation in 15 minutes.
Well, and that was the other thing, just to add on to what Tim is saying, and I like what Tim is saying, because it is very comprehensive. So to make an appointment with your physician about your spouse who's not doing well, that physician has a 15-minute slot for the most part, and it's very quick, and so it's complicated. The only thing I would add is if you are going to go to the physician about your loved one, is to phone ahead and to say, this visit is about this, so that there's a heads up as opposed to going in and the doctor is thinking you're just gonna get a 10-minute visit here.
And you've got this list of things you want to talk about.
Right.
So let's talk about advanced directives. This will be our last of the 3 topics. The first thing is to simply think about it. And you can read, there's a lot of reading, there's resources on the back, there are books beyond that. You can Google frail stage of life, etc. To pray about it according to your tradition, to simply reflect on it, to be out by the river or up on the mountain or wherever, to just be thinking about your life or your loved one's life. Again, it's not age specific. It could be for a younger person as well. Journaling for many people, just writing stuff down. I remember sitting on a dock one time and kind of saying, okay, how do I want, it was about 3 years before I retired, how do I want the rest of my life to go if it was up to me? Knowing that I would likely die at some point. And so all this thinking about it is stage 1. Then talk about it. And I've suggested 2 nationally based resources that are on the back. One is called the Conversation Project. If you just type that in, there'll be a whole mess of stuff. Everything you can order, guidelines, even games that you can play to get that conversation going. Or the other one, another national program is called 5 Wishes. And again, you'll see that on the back. And these 2 are designed to help people talk about it. And both of them actually will then spill over to then the 3rd stage, which is writing it down. Writing it down. They have resources and booklets and all kinds of stuff to write down who is your durable power of attorney for healthcare, what is your living will, which is different than your estate will. Remember, your estate goes to me, but the living will about what do I want. The importance between those 2 is that the living will is what I want. And there was an example over here of I want this, I don't want that, and under what circumstances. Now, you could say, well, if it's Tuesday and the wind's blowing from the east and this happens, then I would want CPR or whatever. That's grossly over detailed. The other is, I don't know, whatever. So there's extremes, and those are the dangerous ones. Unfortunately, no matter how much or how little detail is put in, what happens, you fall between the crack. So this is where the who is your substitute, your surrogate, your proxy, who knows you, because what's happening is probably not going to be listed on your living will. It might. If my heart stops, no CPR. But it might not be. It might be, what if you trip and fall and smack your head, but your heart's still beating, like your example early on. So the who was it, well, if say Matt has designated me. Well, I know Matt, and he would not want, or he would want, to fill in that gap, because it rarely will actually happen the way you intended or assumed or named it. And so the durable power of attorney. Now, the durable part means it lasts until you die. It endures, that power of attorney endures until you die. It also only happens when you can't make your own decisions. So there's medical or clinical capability, I am capable of making decisions, and there's legal competency. Legal competency, we're all assumed to be legally competent because we're adults and no judge has said they can't make their own decisions, and therefore they need a guardian. So legal competency always involves a guardian. So our children are not considered legally competent because they have a guardian, parents or other designate. But capacity waxes and wanes. So if you take a bunch of morphine on board and you're out to lunch, in that moment, you are medically or clinically incapable, but usually that resolves and you come back. So do not interchange competency and capacity.
I have
Yes,
another
please.
question. I am durable power of healthcare for
Mhm.
my father,
Yep.
who's on the East Coast.
Yep.
He's remarried, second wife.
Yep.
She's there. So maybe this is more of a legal question. When is it durable power of attorney and when is it spouse?
The written one supersedes the married one.
Absolutely. You are the.
That's what I
You
needed.
can go into the what, and again, will
And
you
it-
write, yes.
Didn't know if it was state dependent.
No, not usually.
Okay.
No, if you write down that I designate Tim as my DPOA for healthcare, and, I've got my wife, it's him.
Well, that just
Now,
made my job
you
harder.
can defer, you can say, well, listen, I'm just gonna call her
Obviously, I'm gonna make
Sally.
sure that we're,
Right, she can be,
Right.
so that's
Okay.
another discussion.
There is a strict pecking order in all states of first this one, if that, then this one, then this,
okay.
all the way down to, do you know that person? Well, yeah, kinda. That would be the bottom of the line. Go ahead.
So, let's come together here. So we're talking about advanced directives, and then Tim got into durable power of attorney. So is durable power of attorney a part of advanced
It
directives?
is one of them.
Is one of what?
Advanced directive is a comprehensive term of
Right.
several documents.
Right,
Durable power of attorney,
right,
which is who can make decisions on your behalf whenever you're not capable. And then the living will is your statement of this is what I would want or not want under what circumstances.
and the durable power of attorney would know about that, because they're gonna be the ones probably to enact that. Okay,
And then a very specific document is called a POLST form, Portable Orders for Life Sustaining, it used to be called Physician's Order, now it's Portable Orders for Life Sustaining Treatment. This is a document that a care provider, a physician, or a nurse practitioner, or a PA would sit down with you and ask 3 basic categories of questions. And again, you'll see it on the back on how to order one of those, or your doctor's office should have these.
right, they do.
Now, just because you have a pulse doesn't mean you don't want treatment. Because one of your choices is, you darn betcha, throw the whole kitchen sink at me until I am done. And that's an option. But it also says, I want just comfort care, or I want to have treatments, but non-aggressive treatments.
Right,
So give me oxygen mask, but don't shove anything down my throat.
right.
Or I want the whole enchilada.
And this
Whatever you
can
can find.
change according to how you're doing.
You
So
can show up at the
six-
doctor's office
6
and
months
say,
from now, that's right, 6 months from now, I need to rewrite it.
Yep.
And there's a question.
yes, please.
Yes, Maggie?
Oh, I just want to make a comment with this. There's one thing that's really important, and this is in the case in which I was working with my mother-in-law. And the EMT showed up one time because she was having a big issue, and they wanted to know if she had, and then it was called do not resuscitate. And so we said she didn't, and we got a lecture about how she should have it. So then everybody in the family decided that she should have it. So everybody went down, talked to her individually, and finally my husband said, Maggie, you go talk to her. Maybe you can talk some sense into her. So I go down and I have the form. And so I'm going through each item and I'm saying, Mom, do you want this? And she goes, no. Do you want this? No. All the way through. She wanted none of it. And so I said, well, this form guarantees that your wishes are done. And she said, well, I don't want the form. But the issue wasn't that she didn't want it. She didn't, nobody had told her that if she wanted to, she could tear it up. I mean, and so that's what I said, Mom, it's yours, and we're
She was
gonna leave it
fearful of it.
right here on your end table. You don't want it, throw it away.
Yeah.
And as soon as I said that, she said, oh, well, that's easy, signed it, we were done.
Yeah.
So it's letting when you're dealing
Sure.
with another person,
Sure.
be sure that they understand that it is theirs, it's not yours, it's not the neighbors next door, that it is
Right.
yours. And as soon as she knew that she had control, we were done.
Good segue into the fourth one, which, yes,
I
please.
think Helen had a question.
Yes, please, Helen.
Well, this is different than what you're talking about, but one thing is stay off of ladders. It's not funny.
Oh, no, it is not.
It is, it's not.
Broken neck. My son-in-law fell from a ladder 3 times. And if you're gonna be on a ladder, have somebody there with you.
Absolutely. And all the roofs.
Yes.
Or in attics where you fall through the.
Yeah, attic, all through the.
No, we're to the
And
wise.
another thing
Yes, please.
is, if you're single, it helps if you have a device that will
Notification.
call. I have one for the Guardian,
Mhm.
and you never know when you'll use it. Not only for yourself, but for your caregivers or whatever.
Is the Guardian God? Who is Guardian?
It's a company, it's medical, and if somebody wanted, I could do my.
It'll ring automatically.
I did massive research on which were the best two companies.
Yeah.
So-
Mom needs to be on one, yeah. exactly.
So if somebody wants some information, come and talk. to
Yeah.
me.
Good, good.
Where do they store the pulse?
So, write down your plans. Now here, this is where it's different than your estate plan. Now that we know is all squirreled away behind your socks in your drawer. This, you want everybody and their dog to know about. Your directive, any of your advanced directives about healthcare, especially the pulse form, your living will, durable power of attorney. And so you share it with your dog. You take a copy to the doctor, you take it to the hospital, you take it to your kids, you take it to your POA, your person who's got power of attorney for you. Then, especially for the pulse form, which is, it's brighter green than your shirt. I mean, it is, you can see it from a country mile. And refrigerator, put it on the fridge. So if something happens and you go down, so to speak, or your loved one goes down, and here comes EMS, that's where they're gonna go looking,
Where they go.
is to the fridge. And you can put it on the side, so it's not out in front of God and everybody, but put those documents.
So chest compressions, if the EMTs, and they show up basically on a 911 call and your pulse says no chest.
That's correct.
Say if
I
CPR
mean,
is,
it can include a DNR, in other words.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
what happens, Bruce, oftentimes there will be CPR that's happening. And EMS comes in and they go to the refrigerator, they see this individual has requested no compressions and they're stopped.
It's a legal medical physician's order.
This can be renewed. You can look at this once a year and say, oh, I've changed my mind. I want
Oh, your
this.
life changes and you say, I no longer, okay, who's over here?
Phyllis.
Yes, Phyllis.
Do you take this on vacation with you?
I would. I mean, if it matters that if something happens, then you know, it used to be you could get a little copy and stick it in your wallet, your purse or whatever. But for folks, let's say a person who is frail and is at the coast for the week, but they want to make sure if something happens that their wishes are honored. So it is interstate in that sense. So if you go to Oregon and you, because theirs is like real bright pink, Oregon's. Ours is real bright green. And so, yes, if it matters, then take it with you, because that way, if something happened, if I was at a cabin or a condo or something, slap it on the fridge there even.
Is there a way that you would carry a card that has a QR code or something in it that ties to a national, or
Yes.
some database where, you know, if they want to know, if they see this card, they can just immediately tap in?
Yes, there are efforts. It's been hard to network all of that. The hospital has tried to do them, intra-hospital, Providence system have tried to do that with varying levels of success. That's where whoever your substitute, your proxy is, so let's say you go down and they go, what do you want us to do? And we're saying, well, I know he said, do this, don't do that. Again, just because you have one doesn't mean what it says, but what it does say, then they will honor that because they are under a physician's order to do that. Now, let's say someone says, I don't care what that damn thing says, you do CPR. Okay, they'll do CPR, get them to the hospital, and then they'll reassess. And they might even stop there, as Tim was just saying. So sometimes, again, the plan doesn't follow, and so we do the best we can until such time as we can be in a more controlled environment.
Do we need an attorney for any of this with advanced directives?
Not for the medical stuff. Now, many attorneys will have, especially those who specialize in senior law care, will have the medical part along with the estate part. But these are medically legal, if I can put it that way, rather than, what to do with your property and all the stuff. Again, remember, it comes to me. And so, but you do need to have a healthcare professional, physician, a DO, an MD, a nurse practitioner, a PA will sign that, and you'll see that. And you can go online and download one and see what it looks like, and what all the different choices are that you can make. And you can, there's places to, what it means, you can, free text it like that. So think about it, talk about it, write it down, and share it. This is super, super important. If you don't care if your wishes aren't followed, fine, don't worry about it. But if it matters, these are the steps. Please, Laura.
I think you might have answered this question, but what if the spouse insists on, going against the advanced directive of their spouse?
If the spouse is also the DP of the durable power of attorney, if you've never written one down, spouse will be next. And then if you're not decisional, and they're speaking on your behalf, we have to follow yours on behalf of them unless they, become decisional again. And it may go against. But
so the durable power of attorney overrides any living relatives that are insisting on.
And because of that, those of us who have multiple kids and mom or dad is close to one of those kids, and that's the durable power of attorney, and there's conflict in the family. And we can talk about this. We suspect that we'll come back and talk about this further. But that's where there needs to be conversation so that we're all on the same page. But the durable power of attorney is going to be the one.
Marilyn?
Well, I just want to, I'm going to be into the content thing.
Yes.
What she brought up is absolutely why families and individuals need to have these conversations. This is why Tim says to talk about it. Because share it with everybody. Make sure that people know what you want.
But my experience in more than one case has been that people think they know what they want, but when they're in the situation, it radically changes.
Yes, that's part of
And
the.
it's all the motion that's overriding, and that they may change back, but in the moment, it's to.
The individual can change their mind, or they can, or another option is a trial, if you will. I don't know if I want to be intubated the rest of my life. Well, let's do a 3-day trial of intubation, let's say, and then reassess, things like that. But interfamily conflict, oh, sweet Jesus. That can really challenge things. Go ahead, and then we're gonna go to Lynn.
Think of the number of people that don't have these conversations, and then they're faced with it.
Yep.
And so we're going from all of this discussion to, bam, it's a matter of, do I go with intubation or not? I mean, just that fast. So you're right, it's very difficult for people to then be faced with this immediately, as opposed to be working on it and changing their views as they are getting older.
Change.
Well, just an example, we had friends, and they were worried about what their family was going to do. And so what they did, the husband talked to mine, and my Brenda talked to me and asked, would you be the person, my durable power of attorney for help?
Right.
Yes.
And so it's at their financial planner, it's in their bank, it's on the refrigerator, it's everything.
Great.
So I'm not part of the family, but she wanted to know, would you be able to, like in her words, pull the plug? Would you be able to
implement your wishes, your wishes.
Well, yeah, but I just.
We're politically correct. Lynn?
Yeah.
Well, every time I go in for my yearly Medicare exam, they want me to do this.
Mhm.
So they send you down, or they tell you to call, or they will call you,
Yeah.
Healthplex down in Cadillac.
Yeah. That's a Providence sponsor,
Yeah.
advanced
And
directive.
they have a person that talks to you, and I still haven't filled it out.
Good.
I don't know how I want to go, I guess.
Oh, and we don't, and that is part of the difficulty, is we can think we're being objective, and I designed one for Cadillac years ago that had about 5 situations in life. If I'm otherwise healthy, my heart or lungs stop, I would or would not burn, about 5 candles. If I have, a bad heart and then my heart stops, blah, blah, blah. If I have a stroke and then my heart and lungs stop, blah, blah, blah. And it had this whole graph, people's eyes are spinning, looking at that. But my point is, that was just an example of this, in German, the Sitzenleben, the situation in life changes. And like I said earlier, you thought as long as this happened, I would or would not want, and it changes. That's where the person that you trust with your life, okay, they're not going to make a perfect decision any more than you would make a quote, whatever perfect would mean. But they're going to do the best because they know you, and you have talked. Please talk.
Yes.
And they know this didn't quite fit what Lynn said she wanted, but I think she would probably say, in this circumstance, turn left or turn right. Turn left or turn right. There we go. That's where I think of the 2 documents, living will or power of attorney for healthcare, this is the one that matters. Because the document may or may not address the situation, but that person that you are trusting with your life is doing the best they can, and they will not do it flawless, but they will do the best they can. Case example with a woman who was giving birth, prenatal, but about to give birth. Jehovah's Witness did not want to have blood, which is not a Jehovah's issue, it's a patient right to accept treatment issue. But she desperately needed blood within a minute or 2, or she was going to die. She was going to do the bleed out mess, and the husband had to say yay or nay. If she gets blood, she lives. If she doesn't, she dies. But he knew that she didn't want it. So he opted for life. And my job was, as a chaplain, was to help him understand from her religious perspective, if she can't speak it and he's trying to do the best he can, neither will be condemned. If I can be blunt. Okay, so that's why partly to have a chaplain on board to understand the religious as well as the emotional, spiritual, and all that jazz, because it is not just an academic exercise.
Are they still married?
I have no idea.
It's 5:25.
Okay.
So,
Any other questions, please? Okay.
I'm wondering, I know in the state of Washington, there are a lot of different options now for what happens to your body. Can we get into any of that, or is that something else that another time was worth?
Probably put that, on the parking lot. I mean, you can be buried any number of different ways. You can be cremated. You can, if your body is accepted by a medical institution, it can be donated.
chemically.
Yeah, that's,
And there's also composting now.
yeah, that's
I mean, there's all
different types
kinds
of burial, if you will, and how ashes to ashes and dust to dust. Yeah.
Would that be a topic, for me, it's a topic of interest. When I was with hospice, there were so many people whose loved one died and they didn't know what to do. And then when they did make the decision, okay, well, I guess we'll cremate. Well, where do we go? Who do we call? I'm wondering, I know I would be interested in the Tri-Cities to know what resources I have. Could that be something of interest?
Well, that's why I asked the question, because I think, if you're interested in composting, I just read an article about it. There's only one place in the state of Washington that does it.
Like Oakdale.
So,
Yeah, so let's capture that, and
Other questions?
go there.
Other questions?
Yes, Steve?
Yeah, I want to make sure that I don't forget to say thank you to both of you, because this is a really important subject, and I appreciate the expertise that you both have on this subject. As far as the directive and also the decision on what to do with my body, to have that already done really helped inform a serious medical decision that I had to make earlier this year. And another resource, about 15 years ago, Atul Gawande wrote a book called Being Mortal. And
Being Mortal.
And a year later, he hosted a frontline video on PBS. And that frontline video is still available on YouTube. But Atul Gawande grew up in Athens, Ohio. Both of his parents were physicians from India. And then he went to medical school himself and became a doctor. And he came to a discovery that he had been taught in medical school that he should try to keep people alive as long as physically possible. And he came to realize that quality of life is more important than quantity of life. And every patient has their own idea of what constitutes quality of life. And so the book and then rewatching the frontline video really helped me with my decision, but also knowing that I had written the directive.
Yes. And a power of attorney, durable power of attorney? Do you have a substitute decision maker for you?
Yes.
Okay.
So what was the name of that?
Being Mortal.
Being Mortal? Okay.
Being,
By
B-I-N-G.
Right, okay,
Atul
got it.
Gawande.
Yeah.
Bruce?
Well, yeah, the way you kind of categorize this is a durable power of attorney. If you haven't written a durable power of attorney for healthcare yet, and you just go out to an attorney and say, I want to do a durable power of attorney, will they know to automatically include the healthcare aspects? Or
No, you should specify.
But if you don't, is it implicit in the larger durable power of attorney that includes healthcare, or is that automatically excluded? That's a legal question.
No.
No.
You might get a whole package.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of lawyers, as Tim said before, if they're doing your estate planning, will address medical issues as well. But for example, we have two children. One of our children is our durable power of attorney for the estate. They can take over if we can't manage our money anymore, whatever. The other child has our durable power of attorney for healthcare. There were two separate documents, two separate decisions.
I understand you can write them that way. I just wondered if somebody did not have a
Generally, if a lawyer is sloppy and they just give you a power of attorney, it will generally just be for money matters.
Okay, so and if there is, by definition, so basically, if you don't have a healthcare durable power of attorney written, the larger durable power of attorney does not by default, unless it has explicit language in it.
Right.
Okay,
There.
That's all I want.
Yes, yes.
I wonder, is
Please.
there,
Okay, we're in overtime, people, so
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
the pulse form
Mhm.
is what we used when we did our durable power of attorney for healthcare.
No, that's a living will.
No.
There's not, you didn't name someone to be your substitute. Now, they may have signed, but that's not designating them as a DPOA for healthcare.
But we did.
It should be a separate document.
Yes, it is a completely
Oh, okay,
separate
yeah,
document.
okay.
So
But it has terms that are very similar to the pulse form.
Well, they completely overlap.
Right.
One is,
Right.
like I say on the back side down here, one is what decisions, that's the pulse or the living will, and the other is the who decides, that's the durable power of attorney for healthcare. See that down at the bottom of the back?
Yeah, but they can, they can be basically the same, well, you can use the same wording.
Right, but
They
the
talk
job
about
of the
same-
proxy
Right.
is
right.
to implement what's on the pulse, like that. Jim?
So I think here's a good case of this whole discussion for me to continue, where if you get this packet of documents, it might be good to have an independent person review and explain, yeah, and then you can judge, yeah, that's what I had in mind, or no, because of my experience, this is really unclear here. So then you can get that piece.
Internal consistency, that's all.
Yeah.
I'm a little biased, and I'll communicate this openly, based on experiences, particularly with families that come in and try to take over decision-making when they didn't have the right to do that, but there are some very strong family members that can do this, particularly the daughter from North Carolina that flies in. And by God, we're gonna do what she says when we have documentation otherwise. I like legal representation, good legal representation. That's my bias. I need an ironclad document. At least, certainly personally, I need that ironclad document so that there are no questions. And if there are questions, then it is secured in a legal format. So that's my bias, only because of the family conflicts that I've witnessed.
See, I'm on that line. When I chose my double power of attorney for healthcare person, I did not go to my sons, because I knew they would be very emotionally involved. I did not go to my husband.
Right.
I went to a daughter-in-law who is the most level-headed person in the family.
So, to summarize, our takeaway, where do you go to prepare for frailty? We've got some resources on the back, and our encouragement is to embrace the reality that there is a frail stage in life, that it will come to us at some point in time, and that deeper conversations or even more presentations, such as what we captured here, would be fine. And so we've got two things to watch: what Steve recommended, Being Mortal, and then this cute movie, Thelma. Just gonna put a picture for it. It was really good. So thank you all very much, everybody, for being here, and we'll be here all night.
Later today, you get home and you're thinking, oh, I wish that we would have discussed this or that. Take note and let's talk about it. We may want to come back and talk further about another topic related to this.